In a world where only the strongest survive, where success and failure live side by side, one man built a name that everyone knows. His life is a story of power, risk, failure, and comeback. From a young boy in New York City to a businessman known across the world to becoming the President of the United States, this is not just a story about success. It is a story about never giving up, even when everything seems lost. This is the story of Donald Trump. Before the fame, before the power, before the name that the world would come to know, there was just a young boy growing up in New York City. Donald John Trump was born on June 14, 1946, in Queens, New York, a busy and competitive place where people dreamed big and worked hard to succeed. He grew up in a wealthy family. His father, Fred Trump, was a successful real estate businessman who built houses and apartments. And his mother, Mary Trump, was a kind and supportive woman who cared deeply about her children. From a very young age, Donald was different. He was not the quiet type. He was full of energy, always moving, always wanting to do something. He liked to lead, to take control, and to win. Sometimes this made him strong, but sometimes it made life difficult. At school, Donald could be a challenging student. He did not always follow the rules, and he often got into trouble. He had a strong personality, and he did not like being told what to do. Teachers noticed that he was smart, but also stubborn. At home, his parents began to worry. They could see that Donald had potential, something special, but they also knew that if he did not learn discipline, his future could be at risk. They asked themselves an important question: how can we guide this young boy and help him become a better man? When Donald was 13 years old, his parents made a serious and life-changing decision. They sent him to the New York Military Academy. For Donald, this was not easy. The military school was very strict. Students had to wake up early every morning. They had to wear uniforms, follow orders, and respect authority at all times. There was no room for bad behavior. At first, Donald struggled. He was not used to such strict rules. He missed his home, his family, and the freedom he once had. The environment was tough and the expectations were high. But slowly, something began to change. Day by day, Donald started to adapt. He learned discipline, how to control his actions. He learned responsibility, how to follow rules and complete tasks. He learned leadership, how to guide others and earn respect. Instead of fighting the system, he began to use it to his advantage. He worked harder. He became more focused. And over time, he began to stand out, not as a troublemaker, but as a leader. Donald became active in school activities. He played sports, especially baseball, where he showed strong determination and a desire to win. His competitive nature, which once caused problems, now became one of his greatest strengths. Other students started to respect him. Teachers began to see a new side of him. The same boy who once struggled with discipline was now showing confidence, control, and ambition. By the time he graduated, Donald Trump was no longer just the energetic and difficult child he once was. He had changed. He had grown stronger, more disciplined, and more focused on success. Deep inside him, a new belief was forming. I want to be successful. I want to do something big. And this belief would shape the rest of his life. This was the beginning of a journey that would take him from a young boy in Queens to one of the most talked about men in the world. But his story was only just beginning. After leaving military school, Donald Trump was no longer the same young boy. He was more focused, more disciplined, and more ambitious than ever before. He continued his education at the University of Pennsylvania, where he studied economics, learning the language of business, money, and opportunity. But Donald was not the kind of person who wanted a small life. He wanted something bigger, much bigger. After graduation, he joined his father's real estate business in Queens. His father, Fred Trump, had already built a strong and successful company, focusing on middle-class housing. For many people, this would be enough. A stable business, a comfortable life. But not for Donald. He looked at New York City, especially Manhattan, the center of power, money, and fame, and he saw opportunity. He believed he could build something greater, something the world would notice. At that time, Manhattan was not easy to enter. It was competitive, risky, and controlled by experienced businessmen. Many people doubted him. They said, "He is too young. He only succeeded because of his father. He cannot survive in Manhattan." But Donald did not listen. He took a risk, a big risk. One of his first major projects was the transformation of the Commodore Hotel, which was in poor condition and losing value. Many saw it as a bad investment, but Donald saw potential. He worked hard to make deals, attract investors, and convince the government to support the project. It was not easy. Negotiations were long and pressure was high, but in the end, he succeeded. The hotel was rebuilt and reopened as the Grand Hyatt, modern, powerful, and successful. This was a turning point. People started to notice him, not just as Fred Trump's son, but as a businessman with his own vision. From there, Donald continued to build bigger buildings, more ambitious projects, stronger reputation. Then came one of his most famous developments, Trump Tower, a tall, luxurious building in the heart of Manhattan. It was bold, it was expensive, and it carried his name, Trump. That name became his brand. For his supporters, Donald Trump was a symbol of success, a man who dreamed big, took risks, and won. They admired his confidence, his bold decisions, his ability to think big when others thought small. But not everyone saw him the same way. His critics had a different opinion. They said he was too aggressive, too focused on image, too willing to take big risks. Some believed his success came from privilege and connections. Others questioned his business methods. So even during his rise, Donald Trump was a controversial figure, loved by some, doubted by others. But one thing was clear: he was impossible to ignore. He understood something important. Attention is power. And whether people supported him or criticized him, his name continued to grow. His early success was not just about buildings. It was about creating an identity, a brand, a presence that stood out in one of the most competitive cities in the world. By the 1980s, Donald Trump was no longer just a businessman. He was becoming a public figure, a name people talked about. A man building not only towers, but a reputation that would take him far beyond business. But success, as always, comes with challenges, and soon his biggest test would arrive. Success can make you feel powerful, but failure can test who you really are. By the late 1980s, Donald Trump was at the top. He had built famous buildings. His name was everywhere. People saw him as a symbol of success, but behind the success, there was a growing problem. Donald was taking bigger and bigger risks. He invested in luxury hotels, casinos, and expensive projects. He borrowed huge amounts of money to build his empire. At that time, everything looked strong. But then, the economy changed. In the early 1990s, the real estate market crashed. Prices dropped. Businesses slowed down. And suddenly, Trump's empire was in danger. He was in serious debt, billions of dollars. His casinos were losing money. His projects were struggling. Banks started to worry. People began to talk. Some said, "This is the end of Donald Trump. He has lost everything. He will never recover." The man who once looked unbeatable was now facing one of the biggest financial crises of his life. It was not just about money. It was about reputation, about pride, about survival. For many people, this moment would break them. The pressure was too high. The losses were too big. And honestly, some critics believed this proved their point. They said his success was built on risk. And now those risks had finally caught up with him. But failure has two sides. It can destroy you, or it can change you. Donald Trump had to make a choice: give up or fight back. Instead of disappearing, he faced the situation. He worked with banks. He made difficult decisions. He sold some assets and restructured his debts. It was not easy. It was not fast, and it was not perfect, but slowly, he stayed in the game. This period of his life showed something important. Success is not permanent, and failure does not mean the end. For his supporters, this was proof of his strength, a man who refused to quit. For his critics, it was a warning, a sign of risky decisions and overconfidence. But no matter how people saw it, one thing was true. Donald Trump was still standing, and the story was not over yet. When everything seems lost, when the world believes you are finished, that is where the real story begins. After facing one of the biggest financial crises of his life in the 1990s, Donald Trump was no longer the same man people once saw on top of the world. His empire had been shaken, his reputation had been questioned, and many were still waiting for him to disappear. But he didn't. Instead of giving up, he started rebuilding, step by step. Slowly, Donald began to focus again. He made smarter decisions. He became more careful with risks. He worked closely with banks, restructured his debts, and found ways to stay in business when many thought it was impossible. It wasn't a quick comeback. There were still doubts, still criticism, still pressure. But he stayed visible. And then he changed strategy. Donald Trump didn't just rebuild his business. He rebuilt his image. In the early 2000s, he entered television. He became the star of a reality show called The Apprentice. On this show, contestants competed for a job in his company. Millions of people watched. Every week, they saw him make decisions, give orders, and judge others. And then came the moment everyone remembered. "You're fired." Those two words became famous around the world. Suddenly, a new generation discovered him, not just as a businessman, but as a strong, competent public figure. For his supporters, this was proof that he was back. A man who had fallen, but refused to stay down. For his critics, questions still remained. They wondered, was this real success? Or just image? But again, no one could ignore him. His name was everywhere again. Donald Trump understood something powerful. It's not just about winning. It's about staying in the game. His comeback was not perfect. It was not easy, but it was real. He turned failure into attention into opportunity, and opportunity into a new kind of success. And as the world watched him rise again, no one knew that his biggest move was still coming. In politics, experience is everything. At least that's what people believed. For many years, the path to becoming president of the United States was clear. You needed political experience, years in government, and strong support from powerful institutions. Donald Trump had none of that. He was not a politician. He was not a senator. He was not a governor. He was a businessman and a television personality. So, when in 2015, Donald Trump announced that he would run for president, many people were shocked. Some people laughed. They said, "This is not serious. He has no chance. He doesn't understand politics." Even within his own party, many did not believe in him. But Donald Trump believed in himself. From the very beginning, his campaign was different. He spoke in a simple and direct way. He used strong language. He focused on big promises. Instead of following traditional political rules, he broke them. He held large rallies across the country. Thousands of people came to listen. Some were excited. Some were curious. And some were strongly against him. He became one of the most talked about candidates in the country. For his supporters, Donald Trump was a voice for change. They saw him as someone who was not controlled by politics, someone who said what he believed, someone who could fix the system. They liked his confidence, his boldness, his message. But for his critics, he was very controversial. They disagreed with his ideas. They criticized his words. They believed he was not suitable for the presidency. The country became divided, supporters on one side, critics on the other, and in the middle, a campaign unlike anything people had seen before. As the election moved closer in 2016, Many experts and media organizations predicted that Donald Trump would lose. They believed his opponent had more experience, more support, and a stronger chance of winning. But elections are not decided by predictions. They're decided by people. Donald Trump continued his campaign, city after city, speech after speech, message after message. He connected with millions of voters, people who felt unheard, people who wanted change, people who believed in his message. Then came election night. The whole world was watching. Results started to come in. At first, it was close. Then slowly, something unexpected began to happen. State after state, Donald Trump was winning. People were surprised. Some were shocked. And as the final results became clear, one thing could no longer be denied. Donald Trump had won. He became the 45th President of the United States. It was one of the most surprising political victories in modern history. For his supporters, it was a moment of celebration. They believed their voices had been heard. They believed change had come. For his critics, it was difficult to accept. They questioned the result. They worried about the future. But no matter how people felt, the result was real. Donald Trump, the businessman, the outsider, the man many doubted, was now the President of the United States. His presidency continued to be just as controversial as his campaign. He made strong decisions. He faced strong opposition. He remained one of the most talked about leaders in the world. Some people supported his actions. Others strongly disagreed. But one thing remained true from beginning to end. He changed politics. He showed that the traditional path was not the only path. He proved that even someone without political experience could reach the highest position in the country. For some, this was inspiring. For others, it was worrying. But for everyone, it was unforgettable. And when we look back at his journey, from a young boy in New York to a businessman, to a man who lost everything, to someone who rose again, this final chapter shows us something powerful. Sometimes, the most unexpected stories become reality. Donald Trump's story teaches us one simple truth. Success is not a straight line. You can rise, fall, and rise again. Believe in yourself, take risks, and never give up even when the world doubts you.